Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where communications, research, and strategy come together.
Welcome, Alexson Calahan, to the podcast. Thanks a ton for being here.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
So we like to start with your journey. You are a consultant today, PR, comms, and you weren't always a consultant. You kind of worked in-house at organizations that did good, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about that journey from school to being in a place where you run your own business and how you made that jump?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always loved writing and I've always loved telling stories since I was a kid. It used to be my jam, taking my spiral notebook and like starting to write chapter books. I never got past the first chapter because I just love a good setup. But that's neither here nor there. So I went to school at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, where I live today. And majored in marketing and management. And pretty quickly after I got out of school, I fell into a sales job, which was not for me, being a lifelong introvert. But what I really found a great calling towards was working in communications for nonprofit organizations. And so I went to work as the communications director for a 3-state region at the National MS Society and loved it. Like, I absolutely loved working with volunteers, working with people who had been impacted by MS, telling their stories, kind of being that generalist in the PR space for the organization. I hopped around to a couple agencies and spent the bulk of my career at the American Heart Association. I started doing communications just for the state of Iowa. But after a couple years, moved to the national office where I eventually landed doing national public relations planning for what was called the patients and conditions market. So all that stuff about AFib, heart attack, stroke,
Yeah.
that was kind of my jam for years. And then the pandemic hit, and telling those stories of the people who had been impacted, who had had a stroke and not been able to see their family because of quarantine or been afraid to call 911 after a heart attack, like that was very difficult to do that for a year and a half, be the point person on that. So that was when I decided I needed to take a step back from working full time and homeschooling 2 kids and telling emotional stories. It was time to chill out, and I thought, what better way to relax than to start a consultancy of my own? So, jokes on me. It's amazing though. I absolutely love this. So that's been about 3 years ago now. And I still do, I kind of have two main buckets of business these days. So I focus still a lot on public health. I love my clients in that space. I work with some of the big guys and then local organizations as well, just doing good work in the world, like letting people know about all that science and all that hard work in the background that they might not be aware of that's impacting their everyday lives. And then I also, because I am an introverted entrepreneur who has a deep knowledge of PR, I've done a lot of work to kind of find some comfort for myself in putting myself out there as the face of my business to grow. And so I offer those tools to fellow introverted entrepreneurs as well. So yeah, these days life is great.
So you said a lot of things that are interesting to me. First of all, introvert, what's that? I don't know where I got it from, but I don't know what that is in any capacity. I'm a, unabashed self-promoter, and I'm constantly in the media, and I don't have any challenge, being on stage or being in front of a crowd. And so it is kind of interesting. There's sometimes I think people like you are seen perhaps as more thoughtful, as more serious, people who don't really self-promote themselves. Do you find that in yourself? Is that one of the reasons you're an introvert? Or do you see people seeing you like that a little bit differently, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think introverts have lots of different innate traits that kind of make us different from amazing folks like you who are comfortable being out and loud and all that good stuff. But we generally prefer to observe. And the main difference, right, between introverts and extroverts is that we need like time alone to recharge. Like after this call, I'm going to need to take a break.
Right.
I'm going to need some quiet and some space. But the the power of that, like the power of being an introvert in PR, of being somebody who observes and who listens and who I don't want to be front and center, but golly, I'll push my clients out there and I will teach them all the ways to feel comfortable and to get out and to share their story. That's been tricky to start to embody that on my own. But it's really important because, as a business owner, we're not going to grow our businesses if we're not telling people we exist.
Right.
So like sitting at this intersection where I see the power of PR and I see how much it can help grow a business or move a mission forward. And like knowing that all those tools are out there, like there's no choice. I've got to find ways to be comfortable with it. And for me, that means like making space to recharge for myself before and after speaking opportunities. It means preparing, like over preparing sometimes, knowing all of what I'm going to talk about. And it means making sure that the stages I put myself on, whether they're literal or digital, are comfortable for me, that it feels like something that I can manage. So finding all those ways uh, to work with my introversion because it's got a lot of superpowers in it.
That's awesome. It's interesting because I'm selective only in that the place that I'm going to go speak, the people I'm interacting with, the people I'm working with, that I kind of have our values aligned. That's something that's important to me. But beyond that, I'll go anywhere, and I get hyped up. I get
Yeah.
excited by by that conversation. You talk about working in medical PR, for lack of a better way of saying it, and we do a decent amount of that, working for health departments, working for health agencies, and some nonprofits that do that. And I find it to be sometimes awkward and super intimate. Like we're asking questions about people's reproductive health, like young people's reproductive health and older people's issues that come with getting older and bodily functions. And it's very intimate and sometimes it's uncomfortable. Is there like some way you came up with to kind of overcome the fact that you're talking to these people and talking about these people in those capacities? And it's just not natural for Americans. I don't know if there's any country where it's natural to just dive in and talk to a 16-year-old about their reproductive health or a 80-year-old about peeing their pants.
Yeah, those are definitely sensitive topics. And I think that's kind of where I have a little bit of the advantage over somebody like you who's got, a bullet list of questions that you have to ask. Like when I'm talking to these folks and helping them prepare their stories for sharing in a medium that they're comfortable with, like first of all, they've stepped forward, they've kind of raised their hand and said that they want to do this and that it begins as a one-on-one conversation with me or somebody that I'm working with to kind of go through like they just dump their story and it's messy and it's emotional and it's weird and then it's my job to kind of go through and like pick out those nuggets and those common threads that can kind of craft it, not that we're changing their story but we're just organizing all those building blocks, right, to make sure that they're telling their story in a way that doesn't jump around, that's easy to follow, and that is told for maximum impact. So it's a little bit different than than like going through the questions, I guess. But it's all about building that trust first to make sure that they feel comfortable dumping all this information.
Yeah, it's almost like you get to do all qualitative
Yes.
and no quantitative.
Yeah.
You're right. We have these bullet point questions, and it's rarer for us to get to do the focus group or that IDI, that one on one, and get that full story. But that can be really important, obviously, in the PR side of things.
Yeah.
So, another thing, you live in Iowa.
Hmm.
And I live in California. I'm a New Jersey kid, growing up. There's a lot of people on both coasts that really don't recognize anything, in between. Maybe like a Houston and a Dallas and a Miami, but there's nothing else in this country to a lot of us.
Yes.
And so, what is that like? Is that an amazing positive for your business? Is it a detractor? Is it a challenge for travel? Is there any kind of dynamic that we wouldn't understand living on the coast?
I don't think so. I mean, it's kind of a neutral point for me, right? Like I would never imagine that I would be competing with agencies like on the coast. That's not the game I play. So much of the work that I do is really around building relationships with people. Like that's how I get my clients. That's how I learn about the stories that I'm going to pitch. It's how I like build those media relationships. It's not, um, so it's okay. There's more than enough stories to be told for all of us.
Right.
And I mean, I think living in Iowa, one thing that I do get is like a fascinating perspective on life away from the coast because I, Des Moines, Iowa is a pretty conservative place, and it's interesting to watch that happen. I've lived here for 20 years. I'm not I'm an Iowa native. I'm from St. Louis, which within the microcosm of the Midwest is different.
Right.
Um, so it's interesting to watch how things have shifted and changed, the language that changes, and just like the dynamic that changes over here in the past few years.
When you say that, I mean, I don't mean to talk politics, but do you mean kind of like a more liberal attitude?
Oh, I wish I did.
Okay. So just the opposite.
Yeah.
Kind of more insular. Okay, I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
We do work all over the country, so I see every kind of microcosm of America. But there is definitely, certainly on the coast and a lot of the places we work, even in Texas, there is kind of a liberalization of laws. I mean, not necessarily of people's personal philosophy, but the legal aspects and the making of laws, they tend to get more progressive in their thinking. Not, AOC progressive, but just kind of incrementally getting more open to more people and more ways of life and things like that.
Yeah. I mean,
But maybe not so everywhere.
well, progress is slow, and it's frustrating, though, I think, to be in the middle and to see things happening on either side of you that is totally different. And then it's just a different feeling here.
Look, I grew up in politics with my first kind of start in
Yeah.
business, and I don't have a great appreciation for that anymore. What I love about where I'm at in my life from a political standpoint is I get this 30,000 foot view,
Hmm.
and working with people on both sides. It's an important part of American fabric, and everything we deal with has a public policy overtone to it. So I get the benefit of like seeing both sides and working with people in all corners and
Hmm.
not having some anger about any particular thing. So it's fascinating to understand the different parts of the country and how they're leaning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your career has spanned a little bit of time here. You have a master's degree, you've got some time in academia. Is there some mentor, like one person or that you have to give a shout out to that like was instrumental in guiding you toward communications or was very important in your career and gave you that level jump? Or is there someone you like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I began my master's program, there was a professor named Gary Wade at Drake University, which is where I did my undergrad and my master's. But he was just so helpful in helping me realize that maybe that more traditional marketing side, or I'm sorry, the business side of marketing, like going into the for profit, was probably not going to be the right fit for me, but doubling down on all of these amazing tools that, within PR can make a difference, and using those skills to make the world a better place and focus on nonprofit work was really, really helpful. And I am so grateful for that.
That's awesome. I love the stories of people who guide us.
Yes,
They're very important. All right, let's talk a little bit about workflow, tech stack. You are a solopreneur or you've got a small shop? How many people were with you?
I am just me.
Okay. I started that way. We all kind of at some point started that way. We've got a bigger shop now, but I'm super interested in how people organize themselves, what software they use. I got a little glimpse as you turn to the side, people won't see it, but there's a printer sitting behind you.
Yes.
I don't think I've printed anything out in 6 years, unless someone like required me to. Do you use your printer? And what other workflows are critical to you getting your work done?
Oh my gosh, I'm such an old school creature of habit. Like to this day, my spiral notebook
Right.
is still the most important important tool I've got. I use my printer all the time because I think better when I can see things in real life. So in terms of the other tools that I use, like I've got my media databases, I've got my podcast databases, all those monitoring softwares. I'm starting to find comfortable ways to use AI. Some of the ways that I do that are like you know, when I'm practicing for a public speech or when I'm training, media training folks, like I use Udly.ai to record them. And that provides like awesome feedback. It asks follow-up questions. It tells you how fast you're talking. Like that's a really awesome tool for any kind of speaking prep. And then, just kind of some of the other tools to like turn my thoughts and bullets into a pretty PowerPoint because that's not my jam.
Right. Usually, I never heard of that. That sounds awesome.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, it's super cool.
That's a gem.
You can upload even like existing videos, and it's got a free version that lets you do a decent amount for free.
Awesome. And as far as like, how do you organize yourself? Is it just the spiral notebook, or is it a calendar? And how do you interact with your clients? Do you like require them to use your system, or do you use what they use necessarily?
So I work with almost all of my clients are virtual first. So I've met very few of my clients in person, which is fine. Um, 'Cause I'm an introvert. But typically I blend into whatever systems they use, especially when I'm working with large organizations. They've
Right.
got their way of doing things. I use Monday.com for project tracking and things. Just keep everybody abreast of what's where in the workflow. But otherwise, I keep it really simple. Um, I just can't use a lot of tech. I try really hard. And when it makes my life easier, that's great. But I've found sometimes that like just having too many of those, too many, too much reliance on all the different tools confuses everything. And then you just have stuff everywhere. So I like to keep it simple. I'm still sending Word documents and, keeping it tight.
Yeah, I'm always attracted to that next shiny thing, but I'm also super conscious of the fact that as a company, we live in just a couple places.
Hmm.
And unless it bolts on to Zoom or Box or Outlook, I'm not going to get there because it's just too painful to bring something else into the fold.
Yes.
So, what is your, just quickly, your morning? You wake up. Is it like yoga time and you time, or is it I've got to check these 12 apps and this news cycle and know what's happening? What does that look like in the morning?
Okay, so this is going to get messy because in addition to running Small Adventures Communications, I also homeschool my two children,
Ah,
and they are 9 and 11. So I wake up, I have my coffee outside, no matter what the weather is, because that is some me time.
right.
Um, and then we do lessons, me and my kids. So like I'm pretty much like the homeschooler in the morning, and then the afternoons, they're running around doing activities. They're in piano, they're in trumpet, they're in scouts, they're in all the things. And so that's when I get to work. And I love that because it really does divide my day between two things I adore, which is my family and like making the world a better place and using, all these writing skills and being able to tell stories and work with the clients who I adore. Um, and then, evening is more activities. We got dance, we got soccer, we got baseball, all that stuff.
That's great. You can kind of divide it like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is yes, but do you ever fully unplug, not just in your coffee time in the morning, but like, is there like a vacation? Do you actually like unplug? I'm not available. This is my week for family vacation, or are you still always in some way a little bit on?
I mean, it's impossible to fully unplug, right? Like, especially in this industry, I'm just curious. What is going on in the big wide world? No matter how much fun I'm having, I'm that person who will be in line at Disney World and still just like check in on NPR just to see what's going on. Just because I want to know, like, the world goes on and I love to learn about it. I love to see what's happening next because on it, you never know. So it's fascinating to me. It would feel not like it would feel really sad to not get the full holistic picture of the world. I
Sure.
feel like even on a vacation, but I do love to travel.
Yeah. I agree. I don't have an interest in that fully unplugged. I mean, I can for moments, on a hike with my daughter or something like that. I can do that.
Yeah.
But after those 3 hours are done, I'm going to want to see what's happening in the world.
Yes.
Okay. Finally, your mantra, your ringing phrase that drives how you operate, your piece of advice for the world. Like, what is that one thing that drives you and you think everybody should know about?
I think that it is so important to find the thing that you can do every day to help work towards brighter days ahead because they are there if we work for them and if we, seize them. um, it's so important to find whatever it is that lights you up and be doing it for a reason, more than a paycheck, more than like just making something cool, but like something that you actually think is going to improve the world. That's been a key to me, like a key motivator for me throughout my career. Um, and I've gone pretty far with it. So I would advise everybody to find what way you're doing that.
That sounds great. That's very good advice. Much appreciated. This has been really fun. Thanks a ton for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.